The glass thorn. The first time Callan felt the sting of betrayal, he didn't understand it. It was a quiet afternoon in the Cow household, the kind of day where sunlight fell lazily across polished wooden floors, and everything seemed safe, warm, and familiar. His sister, Vera, smiled at him from across the parlor, her laugh ringing like music. But behind that smile was a knife he would feel years later. It began with a letter, innocuous at first, a simple misdirection, a whisper of secrets Callan should not have known. Vera had taken what he cherished most, his chance at his own dreams, and twisted it with a cunning precision that stunned him. It wasn't immediate ruin. It was subtle, almost invisible, but Callan felt it in every fiber. Opportunities lost, reputations tarnished, whispered doubts planted in every corner of his small world. Years passed, and the weight of betrayal settled deep in Callan's chest, like a seed quietly growing unseen until it became a forest of obsession. He watched Vera rise, seemingly innocent, radiant in the eyes of family and neighbors. Meanwhile, Callan's life fractured. Friendships eroded, ambitions faltered, his confidence twisted into a quiet, gnawing rage. He swore, silently, that the day would come when Vera would feel what he had felt. Not through a single moment of public humiliation or sudden catastrophe, but through a slow, meticulous dismantling of everything she had built, piece by piece, until the entire facade of her life collapsed under its own weight. Callan began with patience. Every detail mattered. He studied Vera's habits, her desires, her insecurities, and the people she trusted. Friends, lovers, confidants, each was a potential pawn in the long game. He did not rush. He learned the art of psychological chess, small manipulations, tiny hints of doubt, the occasional accidental slip that made her question herself. Vera noticed sometimes the small cracks in her life, a forgotten meeting here, a friend suddenly distant there. She blamed coincidence, bad luck, or the whims of life. She never suspected Callan. He was always careful, always invisible, his resentment hidden behind smiles and casual words. Years turned into decades. Callan's life was not without sacrifice. He watched celebrations he could not enjoy, endured holidays in silence, let opportunities pass him by. Each act of patience, each piece of pain he swallowed was a brick in the foundation of his ultimate revenge. By the time Vera celebrated her 50th birthday, Callan was ready. The first phase of his plan was subtle but devastating. A network of old confidants and carefully positioned letters exposed small, personal betrayals of her past. Friends and allies began to retreat. Whispers of scandal, never outright, but insinuating enough, shadowed her every public appearance. Vera felt it immediately. Her confidence, once unshakable, wavered. She sought counsel from Callan, unaware he had orchestrated the entire unraveling. His words were soothing, full of concern and sympathy, a cloak that concealed the precise, cold calculation underneath. Each meeting, each conversation was a trap, guiding her into self-doubt, planting seeds of paranoia, convincing her that the world itself had turned against her. Months turned to years. Callan's manipulations were invisible, yet their effects were unmistakable. Vera's relationships began to crumble. Friends who once adored her now questioned her motives. Even her closest confidants started doubting her loyalty. Callan observed silently, noting the subtle changes, a flinch at certain questions, a hesitation in conversation, a tightening of the jaw. Every nuance mattered. His revenge was no longer about triumph. It was about control. The exquisite torment of knowing she could feel nothing but uncertainty and fear, even as she thought she remained in command of her own life. And yet,
Kalen's obsession was not without cost. He had lost decades of his own happiness to the slow burn of vengeance. Nights without sleep, days without joy. Every year he sacrificed became a weight on his heart. Friends, lovers, even his own children were distant, unable to understand the single-minded obsession that consumed him. The revenge he plotted was as much a prison for himself as it was a torment for Vera. One rainy evening, Kalen orchestrated a confrontation that appeared accidental. A letter, a misplaced message, a shadow of an encounter, all designed to make Vera doubt her most cherished relationships. She panicked, trying to control the chaos, only to find that every decision she made led to deeper confusion and isolation.
Kalen watched from a distance as his sister's world began to crumble. The psychological pressure was unrelenting. She slept less, ate less, laughed less. Her once brilliant mind became consumed with fear, paranoia, and second-guessing. Every moment of control she thought she had was an illusion, crafted meticulously by Kalen over decades. He knew the most devastating part of revenge is that it does not need fire or sword. It can be invisible, silent, and deadly. He wielded time itself as a weapon, each day a hammer shaping the collapse of her spirit. And he endured every pang of loss and loneliness, knowing it was the price of ultimate justice. Kalen's long game had only just begun. By now, the first true cracks in Vera's public image were visible. Colleagues whispered about minor failures, socialites distanced themselves under vague pretenses, and her closest family members felt compelled to choose sides. Vera, sensing the shift, began to panic. She sought advice from people she thought were allies, only to find subtle betrayals lurking in every corner. Letters she once trusted went missing, invitations were declined, gifts she had counted on were withheld. Every day she felt more isolated, her once powerful presence reduced to anxious whispers and defensive gestures. Kalen was always nearby, a shadow disguised as support. Every suggestion he made was calculated, every encouragement a trap, guiding her into further psychological collapse without revealing the puppeteer behind it. The slow burn continued and Kalen's obsession deepened. Each stage of the plan required sacrifices, friendships, personal happiness, and the constant burden of secrecy. Yet he persevered, driven by the memory of the first sting, the quiet betrayal that had shattered his trust decades ago. He began to craft the final stage of his revenge, a psychological crescendo that would leave Vera utterly powerless. Every piece of evidence, every subtle manipulation, every whispered doubt in her ear had been calculated to culminate in a moment of complete disillusionment, where she would realize not only that she was alone, but that every step she had taken for decades had been anticipated, manipulated, and undone.
Kalen knew the endgame would be devastating, but he also knew it would cost him dearly. He would not emerge unscathed. The slow-burn revenge demanded sacrifice, patience, and endurance beyond normal human limits, and he was prepared to pay it all. Vera's world, once so bright and certain, now teetered on invisible fault lines. Kalen watched every gesture, every whispered conversation, as though life itself had become a chessboard and he knew all the moves in advance. But the complexity of the game only increased. Human minds, after all, were unpredictable, and even the most meticulously designed plans required constant adaptation. The first true fracture came during a family gathering, ostensibly innocent. Kalen had subtly whispered rumors to distant relatives months in advance. Tonight, he let those whispers bloom. Vera expected loyalty and warmth, instead felt the cold weight of judgment. Friends she had counted on exchanged awkward glances. Her laughter, once bright and assured, faltered under subtle, pointed remarks. Kalen was always near, his face calm, reassuring. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, voice laced with concern. She nodded quickly, uncertain of herself, but the seeds of doubt were planted deep, and she could feel them sprouting, twisting around every thought. She didn't yet know that every word, every glance, every helpful suggestion Kalen offered was part of a masterful design, a network of psychological traps she could not see. The slow burn demanded patience. Kalen withdrew from friends and neighbors he once trusted. He endured years of loneliness and quiet misery to remain undetected, to preserve the illusion that he was uninvolved, a brother who cared too much. And yet every sacrifice hardened him, sharpened his focus. He learned to move like a shadow, touch her life invisibly, and withdraw before suspicion could ever arise. He began to manipulate her surroundings in subtle ways, a trusted aide suddenly unavailable, invitations lost, gifts mysteriously delayed, compliments withheld. Vera began to feel a creeping unease that she could neither name nor resist. The world seemed to shift under her feet, and Kalen was the quiet hand guiding the tremors.
Each night, as Vera slept uneasily, Kalen's mind replayed every betrayal he had endured, every stolen opportunity, every moment he had silently suffered. His vengeance was not a fire, it was a slow erosion, a patient dismantling of a life once polished and radiant. But with every calculated act, he felt the toll, loneliness, guilt, and the bitter taste of obsession that consumed more than he had imagined. Kalen's manipulations reached further into the fabric of her life. He contacted old friends, subtly introducing doubts, planting tiny errors in memory, and creating the illusion of forgotten promises. Every minor slip Vera experienced felt like gravity pulling her down a spiral she could not escape, and she blamed herself. At this stage, Kalen did not feel triumph. He felt the weight of the cost. Nights of sleepless calculation, days of foregoing joy, relationships sacrificed. His own life became a shadow of what it could have been. Yet he persisted, knowing that only through this painstaking, psychologically twisted process could true justice and true devastation be achieved. Vera's paranoia grew. She began questioning everyone. Each gesture, each word from those around her became suspect. Friends withdrew cautiously, sensing tension, though they did not understand its origin. Kalen's careful manipulations made him appear as her only confidant, the voice of reason in a world that seemed to turn against her. And yet Kalen's work was far from complete. The next stage required a careful balance of exposure and concealment. He began to reveal small, carefully crafted secrets to her, as though she had stumbled upon them herself. These were half-truths, twisted memories, and fabricated incidents, each designed to make her question not only the loyalty of others, but also her own perception of reality. Vera's nights became restless. She dreamed of betrayals she could not prove. Her once confident step became hesitant. She began to isolate herself, fearing that every conversation contained hidden malice. And Kalen, silent and patient, watched, noting every reaction, every tiny fracture forming in the edifice of her life.
The slow burn revenge was no longer merely about causing pain. It was about shaping her reality, bending it with psychological precision until she could no longer trust herself. Callan orchestrated social encounters, family dinners, even casual walks in ways that would maximize stress and doubt. A friend arriving late, a gesture misread, a forgotten detail. Each became a thread in the intricate web that now held Vera in its grip. Months turned into years. Callan's obsession became a weight he carried daily. He watched Vera's reputation subtly erode, her confidence splinter, and her relationships crumble. But every victory came at a personal cost. Friends lost, personal dreams deferred, moments of happiness sacrificed. Revenge demanded this toll, and he paid it willingly, as if each piece of his own suffering strengthened the inevitability of the final act. Then came the incident that would cement her unraveling. Callan orchestrated a seemingly minor misunderstanding at a family gathering, but the consequences were enormous. He guided conversations, misdirected questions, and introduced carefully planted rumors that spread like wildfire. By the evening's end, Vera found herself isolated, her closest friends offering vague apologies and excuses, her family subtly critical, and her sense of control completely shattered. She turned to Callan, desperate, seeking guidance, comfort, clarity. He offered all three, a calm anchor in a storm he had designed. Every word, every touch of sympathy was a precise instrument of psychological torture. He led her to doubt herself, her judgments, her perceptions, not through malice overt, but through the invisible slow collapse of her world. Callan's revenge now entered its penultimate phase, the manipulation of trust itself. He planted evidence, fabricated letters, and guided her reactions so that she would inadvertently confirm her own isolation. Friends she felt loyal subtly withdrew. Family members subtly corrected or contradicted her recollections. Vera's confidence shattered completely, replaced with fear, self-doubt, and anxiety that gnawed at her every waking moment. And yet, Callan felt the price of his obsession more acutely than ever. Each day of planning, each act of careful cruelty required sacrifice. Loneliness pressed down, joy seemed impossible, and every personal dream had been deferred to sustain the ultimate vengeance. But he endured, knowing that the final act, when it came, would justify the decades of pain and silence.
By now, Vera was a shadow of her former self. Her public persona remained intact enough to avoid suspicion, but in private, she second-guessed everything. Every letter, every conversation, every glance carried hidden meaning. She became fragile, hesitant, and dependent on Callan, the one person she trusted implicitly, the very person orchestrating her undoing. Callan's satisfaction was tempered with sorrow. Revenge had become his life. He had paid the price with years of isolation, heartbreak, and personal sacrifice. Yet the long burn, psychological torment he had engineered was unmatched in precision. Vera was trapped in a reality of his design, a slow, burning horror that no one else could see. And in that quiet, meticulously controlled chaos, Callan began preparing the final crescendo, a revelation so complete and devastating that Vera would not only lose control of her life, but also confront the painful truth that every moment of uncertainty, every doubt, every fear she had endured for years had been crafted by the very brother she loved, the one she had betrayed decades ago. The stage was set, every pawn in place, every subtle twist ready. Callan's own soul bore scars from the obsessive preparation, but he knew the final act would deliver a poetic justice that eclipsed all personal suffering. The slow-burn revenge, the painstaking psychological torment, was about to reach its climax, and it would cost them both everything. The years of patience, isolation, manipulation, and sacrifice culminated in a single, fateful night. Callan had arranged everything with meticulous precision, every detail echoing the betrayals he had endured, every act designed to make Vera confront the full weight of her actions. The family estate, once a symbol of comfort and laughter, now felt oppressive. Callan had invited only a few key individuals, those who had unknowingly become instruments in his design. The air was heavy with anticipation, though none except Callan could feel it. Vera arrived, her steps hesitant, her gaze flickering with unease. She still trusted him, unaware that the very hands she leaned on were the ones shaping the trap that would soon close. Callan began slowly, casually, almost as though they were merely reminiscing. He guided conversations with subtlety, allowing memories of past betrayals to surface in her mind. Every question, every smile, every glance reminded her of the choices she had made, the lies,
the manipulations, the cold ambition that had once left him in ruin. But tonight, the reminders were intensified, perfectly amplified. One by one, friends and relatives offered friendly recollections of events Kaylin had twisted, moments where Vera's pride had blinded her, where her selfish choices had left others hurt. She squirmed under the weight of recognition. The pieces, carefully separated over years, now converged into a mosaic she could not escape. Kaylin watched her carefully, noting every flicker of doubt, every quiver of guilt. He had orchestrated this confrontation not with anger, but with precision. His goal was absolute understanding. She must see, fully, the scope of her betrayal and the consequences that had rippled across every life she touched. As the evening deepened, Kaylin introduced the final layer. Physical evidence of her past manipulations, documents, letters, and even small gifts that were reminders of promises she had broken. He let her discover these herself, letting the slow realization hit with maximum force. Each revelation brought a deeper sense of shame, a more profound collapse of her carefully maintained self-image. Vera's hands trembled. Her breath caught. She looked to Kaylin for comfort, for guidance. But Kaylin's eyes were calm, almost serene. He had become the architect of her unraveling, the unseen force behind years of isolation and doubt. And now, finally, he was the mirror she could no longer deny. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling. Why are you doing this? Kaylin's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, almost enough to offer hope. But then his voice cut through, steady and measured. Do you remember all those years ago, Vera? The moments when you turned away from me, when you chose ambition, pride, and cruelty over family? I've lived in silence, endured your betrayal, and now I'm showing you its true reflection.
Her mind spun. Every memory she had buried, every slight she had dismissed, now bore an unbearable weight. She realized with horror that the loneliness she had endured, the subtle manipulations she had experienced, were not accidents. They were orchestrated by the very person she had wronged most. The devastation was total. Vera felt stripped of certainty, control, and dignity. Kaylin's revenge had been slow, drawn out, and psychologically perfect. But as she collapsed in the living room, tears streaking her face, Kaylin felt the first true pangs of regret. The cost of this vengeance had been immense. Decades of personal sacrifice, friendships abandoned, dreams postponed, and a loneliness deeper than any he had inflicted on her. He knelt beside her, his hand brushing against hers. I am not proud of what I've done, he admitted quietly. I have paid a price too, perhaps too high. But you needed to see, truly, what your betrayal has done, not just to me, but to yourself. Vera looked at him shattered. She saw the pain etched in his features, the years of sacrifice hidden behind calm control. She realized the magnitude of his devotion to this slow-burn vengeance, and for the first time understood the depth of her own cruelty. The following weeks were quiet. Vera withdrew completely, haunted by self-doubt, unable to face the world as she had before. Kaylin, despite achieving the ultimate revenge, felt hollow. His life, consumed by preparation for this moment, offered no joy in its success. He had succeeded, but the cost was steep. A permanent loneliness, a fractured soul, in the realization that revenge, no matter how perfect, cannot restore what was lost. Yet in the shadow of destruction, a fragile, strange respect emerged between them. Vera, humbled, began the painstaking work of atonement, not only toward Kaylin, but toward herself. Kaylin, in turn, learned that even the most masterful revenge carries an unforeseen toll. It may devastate the betrayer, but it also scars the avenger in ways that nothing else can heal. Years passed. The family estate, once a place of casual joy, remained quiet. Vera, now subdued and reflective, carried the lessons of her unraveling. Kaylin, though scarred by years of obsession and sacrifice,
remained a silent guardian, a reminder that justice, slow and deliberate, is a force both powerful and costly. The slow-burn revenge, perfected over decades, had left no room for denial. Every action, every choice, every sacrifice had culminated in an inevitable, devastating truth. Betrayal, once sown, cannot remain hidden forever, and the cost of vengeance, no matter how thorough, is never free.